few.
I'm off video. I'm not officially part of this one.
Yeah.
But I'm still here for a few in case anything goes
All
wrong.
right, so we have 8 participants in here already. That's good. Let's start. All right, 11. All right, we'll get started in a few minutes. We'll just let some folks get in, and then we'll get the presentation going. So just so everybody is aware, and I'll mention this again, we are going to leave questions till the end, but there is a Q&A feature that was pointed out to me in this presentation mode of Zoom, which is still kind of new to me personally, and Jason probably as well. But you can ask all your questions in there, and it'll be easy for us to respond to them at the end of the presentation. And I see someone. Cool. Chat.
Hey, Mike, Cameron needs you to make him a co-host. I guess he didn't have a panelist link, so you just have to find his name in the attendees and upgrade him.
Oh, I see. So just change it to, put as a, promote to panelist. Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go. Hey, Cam.
Is there a way to see the participants or just?
Yeah.
Right.
So
yeah,
under attendees. So everybody can use the chat to chat amongst themselves, but if you actually have a question, use the Q&A feature to ask your question.
I think we should wait a few minutes. I think we have
we'll wait.
People
Yeah,
almost
we'll
100
wait
people
till,
RSVP.
Yeah, we'll wait just a couple more minutes. So we'll wait till like 7:06 or something like that. We'll see how many more people kind of flock in.
And can all the participants hear all of our audio or just yours?
I assume everyone.
Yeah, I'm assuming they can hear anyone who's a panelist who's not muted.
Oh, I get it. This is kind of cool. I like this feature. I've never seen the Zoom webinar stuff before. It's pretty good.
Yeah. Well, we had it with the last one, but it was still kind of new to us, and I think Pam did a little bit more hand holding with us on that one. And
I am still here, by the way, just in case something goes wrong. I promise I'll stick around until everything is going smoothly.
Once you leave, everything's gonna fall apart.
Well, I found my phone, so then
that's good. I was like,
and it was on.
We can have the video of. On video, it'll be me calling you saying, "Pam, you have to jump back on."
I really did want to stay the whole time, but yeah. Mom's birthday.
Yes, we will try. We will not interrupt you. Q&A.
No, you can though. If something completely breaks, certainly give a call. Now that I have my phone on.
Gotcha. All right. I think we can get started. What do you think, Jay? You ready to go?
What time is it? It is 7:06. Why don't we wait till 7:10?
Okay, we'll wait till 7:10.
Got 32 people. We'll wait a little bit more.
Send them to the wrong.
I mean, you know how it works. People RSVP and then you get about a third. Oh, man.
Do you guys want to go over the Q&A thing again so people are putting their questions in there instead of into chat?
Sure. So since this is presentation mode, we have the ability to have this Q&A thing, this Q&A option. You'll see it at the bottom of the screen. It'll have Q&A with a little speaker icon there. Any questions you have, you can ask there. We ask that you ask the questions there so it's easy for Jason and Cameron to go through the questions at the end of the presentation so we can do our best to answer any questions people have. You can use the chat just to kind of chat amongst yourselves while the presentation's going on.
I think, Mike, you started like 7:10 we'll start?
Yeah, we're going to start 10 after. We'll get started.
And you think it's about a 45-minute session? How long is the session?
Yeah, probably about 45 minutes to an hour. We'll see. We'll see how quickly I speak and how much I get through. And I've only run through it a couple times, and I didn't really time it. But I feel like it was kind of somewhere between 45 minutes and an hour. I hear Cameron pouring himself a drink.
The post 5 p.m. cocktails?
Yep.
Hopefully it's a good bourbon.
It is. It's a High West. It's pretty good.
That's right. You like the High West. That's good.
Well, it's not the campfire. I love the campfire. This is a High West double rendezvous or rye, something. It's pretty good. I like all their whiskeys.
Right.
Good stuff.
All right. It's 10 after 7, so we can get started. At least start with a little bit of an introduction. Want to welcome everybody to the WordPress Montclair Meetup. Today, I'll be the one giving the presentation on React and WordPress. Yeah, so let's get started with this. Let me make sure that I can share my screen. Okay, cool. Screen's being shared. And play. I got all these things in my way. Let me close some stuff out. All right, cool. Okay, welcome everybody. Today's presentation is Introduction to React and WordPress. A little bit about me. I just started working in React maybe about a month ago in earnest. So this is really much an introduction to React and nothing really too advanced. I've been working with JavaScript probably since 2005. My first 2 jobs were mostly focused in JavaScript. At that time, it was very vanilla JavaScript, jQuery. So that was kind of the big thing back then was jQuery, as it solved a lot of problems. And then as things started moving along, the next thing that I kind of got into was Backbone. Maybe some of you remember that. And that was that even made it into WordPress core. A lot of the media manager stuff was done in Backbone, and that soon kind of went out of fashion. And then it seemed like there was a flavor of the month for JavaScript libraries and frameworks, and I just kind of threw up my hands for a few years. I'm saying I'll just see how this kind of settles and see which one is worth learning after I put a lot of time into Backbone. So here we are, and React, I feel, is kind of set itself apart. There's a few others that are still pretty relevant, but React is big in WordPress with Gutenberg and such. So that's kind of the one I've settled on getting my feet wet with. So back in December 2015, State of the Word for WordCamp US in Philadelphia. I was in attendance for this. Matt Mullenweg famously said, "Learn JavaScript deeply." And I felt like this was a real turning point in WordPress, where the focus was kind of less on PHP and was more focused on the front end with very rich JavaScript UI components. And this is where I feel like it really started. Matt was talking about Calypso at this point, which was the WordPress.com admin. It didn't really last very long, but it was a pretty flashy show that he gave with it. And not too long after this, we started, the block editor started in development. But in late 2018, again, right before a WordCamp US, this time in Nashville, WordPress core pushed out WordPress 5.0, and Gutenberg was introduced into the WordPress core, and along with it came React. So you were able to start using React right from WordPress core. You could include it without having to, pull it from somewhere else. It was right there in WordPress core. So React is a popular JavaScript library. It's not a framework. It's not like other things where like Vue or Angular, which I don't really know that much about, I'll be honest, but they have more of a, from what I know, they have more of a way of doing things. React is a bit more flexible and works pretty well with other libraries, most notably Redux, which is mostly used for, storing data locally. So you're able to kind of pull state back from that extension of it. Some things to know primarily about React is that most of it is made up of components, and these components can have properties applied to them from the outside. Properties can be placed on these components and used within that component. Within the component, it can maintain its own state. So this is mostly handled internally. And this is where kind of the power React comes, is that the components will update when that state changes without you really having to do anything. The way the code is laid out in the component, once it sees something different happen, React reacts to it and changes the way the component looks. And this is done with performance in mind as well, because React maintains something called a virtual DOM, which it compares against the actual DOM and then renders the piece that is has changed. React also, uses this syntax called JSX pretty popularly. So what JSX is it looks like XML or HTML. It's a if you look at it, you get a little confused, being like, why is there HTML in this JavaScript? And at that point, it's JavaScript. It's not markup. It's not HTML. It becomes HTML later on when it gets to the page, but it's important to treat this JSX as JavaScript. And when you see examples, which I'm going to show right now, you'll see what I mean as I kind of expand on this. So it's important to have a pretty decent understanding of JavaScript for these examples. And object-oriented programming helps as well. But I'm going to try to go through these. I've added ellipses in places where I'm not showing any code to make sure that the focus of what I am showing is clear. So this is some React code. It's written in ES6, which is a more modern form of JavaScript. Part of this is importing and exporting. So basically what those mean is you can import something that from a file that was exported from that file. So in this case, import React from React. I create this class. It's a button, and it's going to extend that React.component. In there, you'll see I have a method called render, and I will return what looks like HTML but is JSX. So this is actually JavaScript here. And it will, at the bottom, I will export this button to be used elsewhere. So where that ellipses was, I'm going to put my constructor. So those familiar with object-oriented programming probably know what a constructor is. It's going to take any properties that were applied to this class. We run the super function. This is important for basically defining this within the component. So after I run that super on the properties, I can then use this, and I'm setting this.state equals clicks, and I'm setting that default to 0. So this is I'm setting this default. I'm creating this new state of this button, which I'm going to record all the clicks within it, and I'm going to start off with no clicks at all. And that's basically what this is saying here. Going back to our render method, this really doesn't do anything when this is going to render somewhere. It will just be a div tag with a button with some text that says click me on it. But let's kind of express this a little bit more, show what we could do. So here we're going to take that div tag, and within it we're going to expand on that button. We're going to give it a class name, which is essentially the same as class in HTML. So you would just apply whatever classes you would. We're going to put an on-click event. We're going to eventually make this method part of this button, and this method would be just like render or just like constructor. Constructor would be within this class, and we're going to call it update count. So every time we click on this button, this update count will execute. Instead, we got rid of that click me, and we're going to just decide whatever that name that gets passed down will be a property. So we'll have a property that says name equals like click me. And that'll make sense when I get to a future slide and show you how you would pass a property to this component. And then there's a paragraph tag I've added, which is going to display the number of clicks. So we have this.state.clicks, and when this changes, this thing will re-render, and you'll see the update in the count. Focusing on that update count, with the component comes a method called setState. So we could do this.setState, and within that object we have our clicks. We take this.state.clicks, add 1 to it. So now if we had 0, we had 1, now it's 1. That changes that state, which would then re-render that piece of the component. Now I went through all that object-oriented stuff, but there is a simpler way to do this, and I'm able to fit all the code in one slide using React hooks, which was introduced in React 16.8. If you notice at the top with the import where I have React, I'm also including something called useState. This is a React hook. We don't need a class. We can merely take our button class and make it a function. We could pass those properties to that function. Those properties will be part of that function there, where it says props, much like it was passed to the constructor before. We have this const where this is a constant. It's essentially a variable. Count and update count, and it equals the use state with 0. So that 0 is our default. And within that array of count and update count, the first count is what's storing the state, and the update count is a function that will update the state. So that it can be a little confusing there. It's doing a lot right there, but you know, this is the way it is. This hook functions. You'll see instead of having a render, we just have a return, and we have our JSX in there. Much of this looks pretty similar to what we had in our class. We had our button, we have our class name. If you look at our on-click now, instead of being this dot update count, it just uses update count because that function has been defined in the code above. We take our count and we're adding 1 there. And you'll see underneath where it now says props.name rather than this props.name because that argument was passed to the button. And you'll also see in the paragraph, we're now rendering just count as that is also defined in that constant. And again, we're exporting our button. All right, so we now have this button component in whichever way we'd like to do it, either within that class or whether we want to do this function with the React hook. And we're gonna go to an app. Now, none of this is WordPress yet. This is, I'm just showing you how components kind of work together. Here again, we have the import of React. You'll notice underneath that we now import our button. And we're gonna say that that button lives in a JavaScript file called button.js, which is in a directory called components. With import, if you don't include, the .js is assumed if it's a JavaScript file. You'll see underneath that, like if you have a logo, you could have a .svg or some CSS, it's .css underneath that. You have to define those by their extension. We have another function called app. So this is our application, our single application. We are going to return that much in the same way that we have that JSX. We've put a div, we put a header. There's an image tag that has that SVG in it. And you'll notice under the image tag, we have that button that was either a class or a function there, that capital B button. And there's that name equals click me. So that's that property that gets passed to that component and gets set in that component. And then we export that app. And this is the last step before it gets onto the page. We're going to use React DOM. You'll see that we have import React DOM from React DOM. This is the function that essentially puts on the page, React DOM.render. We could put it in strict mode. If not, that's kind of optional. You'll see within there, there's that app where we have import app from app. Was that previous slide. That's where we're rendering it. And we're telling it to render in getting an element by an ID. So some div tag or whatever that has an ID of root, that's where all this is going to show up on the page. So you would just have an empty tag with root and that application would essentially be there. To kind of show that I actually did all this, to show that it worked, here's that logo with the React logo, and we have our click me button, and we have a count of 0 underneath. If I press play, and I start clicking, you'll see that every time I click it, that state just re-renders that number. And with this, I did it with I set this application up in like a couple minutes because I discovered that there's a super easy way just to set up a React app if you want to play around and get used to creating a React app. All you have to know is a little bit about NPM and the terminal. You could install this package globally. So npm install -g, G for global, create React app. Then make sure you're in a directory you want your application to appear, and you can name it something. I call it my app here. You would then go into that directory with cd, so cd my app, and npm start, and that'll take a couple minutes to install everything. But once you get in there, you'll have a very basic React app you could start playing with with basically no configuration. You would just go to localhost :3000, and your app is going. So this begs the question: when should you use React? And the answer for this is when you have something that warrants it. It is new and it's shiny and you want to play with it, but not every project warrants everything you get out of React. If I have a small little thing, I might still use jQuery for it. But if you have a component that like some rich JavaScript, something where you're maintaining state, where you have something where there's a lot of user interaction with your web page or web application, React is a good fit for it. So let's talk about bringing React over using it with WordPress. So there's a couple things to get started, and I'm not going to go too deeply in the configuration part of it. I'm not going to really talk about Webpack or Babel or anything like that for all those needs for getting your site working with modern JavaScript and such. But the important thing to know with WordPress and React is this particular package. When you do npm init in whatever assets directory you're using in your theme or plugin, you could then install this WordPress scripts and save it to the dev dependency. This kind of gets you really started with React and such in your WordPress environment. Once you have done that, you can open up your package.json file. And there's a couple scripts you can add, but the two big ones are build and dev. If you run npm run build, that will build that, do the full build process for production. npm run dev will set it up as a watcher. So when you make updates to a file, it will then on the fly make changes, and it won't be minified or anything like that, but it will. It's good for just working through the code that you're working on. And then when you're ready to, this is ready for production, you would then stop it and then run npm run build. So things you would know about WordPress already is enqueuing the script. So once you have your React JavaScript file, you would enqueue it. So whatever the path is, you'd place that in there. You'd name it. In this case, I named it my React.js. One of the dependencies that you will need is WP element. That's that third argument of this function, that array where it says WP element. And that will make sure that React is available for when your script runs. Then the last two arguments, 1.0 is the version. You would change that, for production when you want to make sure that your JavaScript's not cached. And then the last argument is true for putting it in the footer. It would be false if you put it in the header. I typically put my JavaScript in the footer. So going along with this, that name my React.js, the way I use React a lot in the project I've been working on, and I'll get into that a bit later, is I localize a lot of stuff to it. So there's a function, WP localize script. Essentially what this does is it takes the name of the script, so my React.js in this case. The second argument is a global variable that you'd have in JavaScript. So make sure it's unique. I called it my React. You would name it something that's relevant to your theme, your plugin, what have you. And then the properties that would be part of that global object in JavaScript. So if I'm concerned about, I have this React app on my front end, and I have an API I want it to talk to make some updates, and I would include it in this, this global object that's being passed to my React app so I can then utilize it. So here I have a REST API that I made up. I have a post ID that I'm getting from maybe a post, and then also a nonce, so I can securely make these requests on post. So we have our fictitious component again. This one I'm just filling in a few blanks here since we already went over how to build a React class. Here I have this update status that I'm going to call when I want to make an AJAX request. And within React, I can do something like this. So here, this is how you would make an AJAX call to, say, the WordPress REST API, method post, in the headers, I include, content type, application JSON, also the nonce within the body. I would do JSON stringify. I have, say, within that last one, I didn't point out, I have a status I'm passing to this method where I could use this here. Say that my REST API endpoint knows what status is. Let's say it needs a post ID. I'm grabbing that from my react.post ID, which was localized to the script in my PHP code, and also passing that nonce as well. Below, you'll see I'm using the fetch method. So I'm going to do fetch with, again, my react.rest API. So that's my endpoint. I'm going to include the REST options that you see above. And then you have some promises. So .then, I get my results, return results.json. Then I got another promise, which has the actual data. Then when I have data.success, I can maybe change state of this component to show that whatever that update that successfully happened, it changed that state. Also within that localizing of the script, I could pass some default stuff to it. So if I had a user that's logged in that had a particular state that they left with, I can update my React component by default to have that state. Then if they made a change, it would communicate with that REST API, come back, I'd update that state again. And so you start seeing it as an application in that way. All right, what about Gutenberg? So I'm gonna just kind of touch on Gutenberg a little bit because there's some stuff that's in React that's relevant to Gutenberg that you should know and kind of expand it. But Gutenberg does its kind of own thing. It has its own config that's different from React itself. But knowing React kind of helps you understand it a little bit more and things you can do. So this is a very, very basic Gutenberg block. It really doesn't do anything except for display. You'll see that importing from WordPress blocks, this register block type, which you'll need to use to register that block. You'll see in this constant I have background color, color padding, so some CSS that I'm going to pass to this block. This is literally an example from like WordPress.org. So I changed like a couple little things, but this is essentially something that you can find online. And I've included the link of more and more advanced blocks on WordPress.org to kind of build off of. But we give our block type a name, and then we pass it an object with a bunch of different settings. So your block needs a title. Your block could have an icon. Your block could be it should be in a category. Attributes, an example I won't really get into, but that's kind of some of the settings and stuff for your block. And then that edit function there and save are used for edit on the edit side of the block, and save is on the front end side of the block, as it says in the text there. Now, based on, well, just to kind of show you, this is what that particular block would look like in the editor. If you were to see this on the front end, it would say from the front end on there, but that's a very basic block. Now, based on stuff that I went over with React and JSX, just to kind of expand on this block a little bit, say we have that button again. Now, this button's going to be a little bit different, but let's say we're pulling either that function or class component of button from components button.js. We still have our block style there, but you'll see instead of having that div tag in the edit and the save, I'm using that button component, and I'm passing a property of style of those block style to that component. So the way that button would look, and this is again very basic, now taking that button out of React, and I'm taking that button out of that Gutenberg config, and now creating my own config for this. And I can have that button with the properties. You'll see I have the button style equals props.style, click me, button. And if I was to look at this now, it would look like this. It's a button now. So you can take the kind of the ideas that I presented to you and apply these things to Gutenberg in like that edit and the save, and then there's a lot of the attributes that you can then start passing to those components as you learn more and more about Gutenberg. Things to read, and I'm going to include these slides. I'll be sending them out after everything, but these are the links to a lot of stuff that I've read and found interesting and helpful. So they'll be, I think that they'll help a lot of people learning this as well. Again, I am still pretty new to this. I kind of have it to the point where I'm able to work with it and learn more. And I'm just trying to pass on some basic knowledge to everybody that's just hasn't gotten to playing with React or Gutenberg yet, and just wants to kind of have a better understanding how it all works together. I'm just gonna say, like, my name is Mike Auteri. I'm a senior software engineer at Penske Media Corporation. And if you want to follow me, my Twitter handle is mauteri. I'm going to kind of do a little bit of a live demo of something that kind of inspired me, like, to really do this talk and learn React. And it is a event managing application that a few of us have been working on called GatherPress. And essentially, we see this as something that could potentially be in the WordPress ecosystem for meetups that is WordPress-powered. And we've been dabbling and using a lot of some Gutenberg and React to make this thing kind of function really nicely with some modern JavaScript and going in the way that a lot of WordPress applications have been going. So I take this moment to kind of show what we've got so far, and the front end is not super impressive yet, so just keep that in mind. But if I was to kind of show you, like, we've been kind of eating our own dog food here, trying to have our meetings with our application. And I'm going to actually create our next meeting, which is on Friday, right now, with the tools that we've created so far. So I'm going to edit this event, and I'm going to open a new tab and show you how this thing works. So a lot of things we've been playing with is we haven't dabbled so much with Gutenberg blocks yet, but I've been playing a lot with Gutenberg panels, which kind of falls more in like kind of the React side of things. And they have WordPress has created built-in components already that that you can reuse. For instance, this component, I created this date time here for start and end. If you notice, it's very similar to the publish immediately. It's the same component that I reused for this. So our meeting, I'm just going to copy some stuff because we don't have we don't have repeaters yet. I'm going to just put the same information in here. Just go up in there. One second. Just copy all that. All right, so our meeting is on Friday. So choose that. It's actually at 5 o'clock. If anybody wants to attend, you're more than welcome. This is an open source project. See, and you'll see that this calendar is actually updating the label on the fly there. And I'm going to make this ends at 6. So now I have my meeting set. I can publish this. Great. View my event. So here we have 2 React components that I created. They're very, like I said, you don't have to have a full page React application if you don't feel like you need it. Here I just decided to make this drop down button React component, and also this this attending with attending status and who's attending and who's not and who's on wait list as a React component. And I actually had to figure out how to have these two components talk to each other, and I can show you what I did for that. So I can say if I want to attend, go yes, and here I am updated right on the bat, right there. If I refresh, I'm still attending. So this actually made an API call to a custom endpoint like I showed in my example, updated my status, and then it passed the information onto this component to say, to re-render who's attending. If I say I'm not attending, now I'm not attending, it now puts me in this column. I refresh, and there I am still not attending. I'm actually going to attend, so I should leave it as attending. To kind of show what I did here, I'll pull up my little code here. So the trick to this with having the two components talk to each other is having a third, having a third function, having an unrelated function, because state can only be managed by the component itself. So one component can't directly change state of another component. So you need something to kind of bridge the two. So here, a trick here is I created this function update attendance list, and this updates the state, but I had to bind it to this component. So here you'll see I took that state, that function update attendance list, and I equal it to update attendance list, and I bind it to this. So I'm binding it to this component. So now when this function executes, this means this component. So that's how I tie it. And all I need to do is then import that, say, update attendance list, to my button.js. And then when I make my API call, which I did here, and on success, I call that function with the update, and it updates that other component. So that might be a little confusing. In my further reading, I have one of the links talks about a parent updating a child updating a parent, and a sibling component updating a sibling component. And I found that kind of fascinating and kind of a neat little thing. So that's really all I got for this. I guess we can start taking some questions. I know I said I think 45 minutes. I really went like 35 minutes. Just tell you one last thing, a little bit about this project. It's called GatherPress. We do have a Slack channel for it. We do have a group of very talented people working on it, and we're always looking for other people that kind of want to get their feet wet in a new open source project. There's a lot of opportunity to build Gutenberg blocks, React components, really kind of start working on this thing and building something really cool. But yeah, that's what I got. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Jason, are you still there?
I am here.
Cool. All right. Get anything to Q&A?
The Q&A was mostly just asking if the session was going to be recorded, which it is.
Yes.
And yes. if we were going to provide the link via email when we're done, which I think we are.
For the video.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so this is actually one of the other organizers of the meetup, Pam. She was on the presentation earlier. This is her Zoom, so we'll coordinate with her to make sure we get that video and put it somewhere where we can send it out to everybody that wants a refresher. I will also put my slides online, so you can kind of look through the sample code I put together, a lot of the links I put together, yeah, and if you're know React really well, or if you have some questions, feel free to reach out to me. If you know React really well and you want to set me straight on a couple of things, I'm more than happy to chat with you about that as well, because like I said, I've been only really doing this for about a month and I'm still uncovering new things literally daily as I continue to work on things. I see another QA come in. What were the
Yeah, we
biggest
just got one.
hurdles? Ah, cool. What were the biggest hurdles when you jumped into all this in relation to your vanilla JS brain? So I understood a lot of the stuff around classes and usage of this. So I think the JSX stuff was, I had to kind of get my brain around that a bit. Getting the idea of components and having them talk to each other was, I had to do a bit of research on how that is properly done. Also with the panels there, and I didn't get into this, but there is a thing like mounting and unmounting. And I kept on running into issues with panels being unmounted and then having them bound to to a function with something that tries to update it. And that took me a bit of time to unravel how all that worked. But yeah, that was a good question. Do you know of any meetup for software testers? Sorry, not to be off track with topic. Thanks. I do not personally. I don't know, Jay, if you know of any like meetup for people that test software.
Oh, like a meetup for software testers specifically? No, I don't. I can ask some of my friends at work who are in the QA department if they have, if they know of any groups like that, and get back to you. And that's an interesting question. You could always start a meetup, obviously, as well. Yeah.
We'd be more than happy to have you test GatherPress.
You can, exactly. You can test it on GatherPress. There you go.
Yeah, cool. Great. Any other Q&A questions before we, I guess, kind of close? I see Autumn back there. Hey, Autumn. That's Jason's daughter.
I think Mickey wanted to make sure that it was clear what GatherPress is.
So GatherPress came out, just to kind of give some background for those that are curious about it. GatherPress was something that Cameron and I both discussed as we drove down to Nashville from New Jersey. So 14 hours in the car, and that was one of our conversations, was basically we didn't like the meetup tools. And we also found that since Cameron and I have been running our Montclair meetup for quite a long time, that we weren't even all that reliant on people finding us through Meetup, as we found more attendees found us through the WordPress dashboard widget. So WordPress was in a unique situation where we do get people that find us on Meetup, but we find that more people find us on from their dashboard widget on WordPress. We also found that meetup.com was really in the spirit of open source, and the ecosystem of WordPress was WordPress.org, WordCamp.org, WordPress.tv, and then Meetup, which was a for-profit company. WordPress probably pays out the nose having a bunch of meetups, and now that I think they're charging per RSVP on that, it seemed kind of ridiculous that WordPress is completely capable of building, event management software, and especially if we did it in kind of this same sort of way that WordCamps do it, create a multi-site, have different meetups be part of that multi-site. We could work off WordCamp APIs, work on geolocation to find different meetups that are all specifically WordPress. So that was kind of like the long-term hopeful goal, but in the short term, it's kind of like it's a really cool application. We're making it an open source. It could be used like in the way I just described. It could also be used with someone just downloading and creating their own meetup for whatever thing they like doing. And yeah, that's kind of, you have anything else to include from that, Cameron?
I think the one of the big end goals is for GatherPress.org to be the default place for WordPress meetups to go. a lot of WordPress Meetup organizers hate Meetup and they want to get off Meetup, but they don't have any place to go. And so we're answering that problem with a solution. It's like, here's our solution, this WordPress-powered. It taps into the WordPress APIs, taps into WordCamp API, it taps into all the existing ecosystems that are WordPress-centric, and brings them over into one centralized place that's also federated. We also provide free free GatherPress communities for any meetup that wants to migrate over. These are all, of course, long-term goals. The short-term goals: get a minimal viable product in place. And we're going to actually probably talk quite a bit about this at WordCamp US this fall in October. We hope to have a pretty mature product by then and have some big WordPress meetup communities migrated over to the solution we're building. So far, a lot of excitement around it. So we're hoping it just keeps going and going.
I see there's another question. I'm going to give someone in our group a shout out here. It says, what about WordPress learning websites? Bud Kraus is on this call, and he runs a site called joyofwp.com. He has lots of videos, learning videos of WordPress on there. So if you are looking to just get your feet wet with WordPress and watch a bunch of videos on different topics on WordPress, he's a really good resource for that. And he's very active in the community. He comes to our meetups basically all the time. So I have no problem giving him a shout out for his service. Cool. Great. So if I think that's about it. We went about an hour. I hope some people got something out of this. If you want to set me straight on some stuff that I'm just trying to figure out, please, send me a message. I'd love to talk to people that know more about React than I do. And if there's some things that you still are a little confused about, and you just want to chat about it, I'm more than happy to chat with anybody about React. We do have a Slack channel. Let me post it here. The easy way to get there. We do have a Slack channel for all the Jersey meetups called JerseyPress. If you would like to check it out, you can go to wpmontclair.org/Slack and put in your email. Many of us in the meetup are on there basically every day. We have a help desk channel for people that are looking for help on different WordPress problems. You can direct your questions there, and people are usually around to chat with you and help you through your questions. We have general chat just to keep in contact with each other. Now more than ever, people are especially looking to talk to another human being. So we have that Slack, and all our meetups are promoted there, and just it's a place to go when there's not a meetup happening. So great. If is there a Slack invite for GatherPress? If you go to our WordPress one and ping myself or Cameron, we can add you to the GatherPress one. I don't know if there's if you go to GatherPress.slack, it's GatherPress.slack.com. I'm not sure how can you just sign up if you go to that? Is that how that works?
I think it's locked down, but
it's locked down.
Yeah, I mean, I can open it up if we want to, but maybe not.
Yeah, we try to kind of we want to kind of make sure that we vet some people, to have a somewhat of a vetting process. We don't want people causing trouble or problems there. But if you join our WordPress Slack and you just want to ping me, or if you just want to ping me on Meetup, just send me a message. Be like, hey, I want to check out the GatherPress Slack. Can you just add me? Just shoot me your email address. I'll be happy to add you onto it.
So just to be clear, the wpmontclair.org/Slack is the Slack invite for jerseypress.slack.com.
Yes. So that's
just to
our
clarify.
meetup. It's also Pam's meetup, which is the Morris County WordPress meetup. We also have Steven's meetup in there, who's the Bergen County meetup. So anytime we have our virtual meetups right now, we've been promoting it and and just kind of helping each other out. We do have a lot, there's a huge membership crossover between all these meetups. So we thought having that Slack for all of them was would be beneficial to all the groups that are in there. And we just named it Jersey Press to encompass all of the Jersey.
It's pretty active now that everybody's, home quarantined. There's no physical meetups right now, and I don't know if there will be in the next 6 months, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Our help desk channel is pretty popular. We do have quite a few people jump in once, every day. There's a question in there. Somebody needs help with something, and it's fairly active. So if you're interested in joining that community, definitely sign up and join us on that Slack.
Cool.
I was just gonna say from a React standpoint, if you want to learn React, I went through Wes Boss's course. It's WESBOS.com. He has a pretty good Learn React course. I believe he always updates it, with newer versions of React and new features of React that come out. So I know I took that like maybe a year ago. And got a lot out of it. So it's pretty interesting. I think, Mike, the one question I had for you with your components talking to each other, the way you did it, is that like analogous to like an event bus or something? Because like I know in the course they always talked about was it props down and events like bubbling up, and yours didn't seem to do either of that. So I wanted to.
Well, props down. So
it definitely props down, but like,
yeah,
like you just like took that event that was kind of like off to the side and said like, hey, just like bind it to this. So it's kind of like,
well, that's primarily just for two components talking to each other. So it's essentially because it's essentially tying that component to that function. So when another component calls that function and passes an argument to it, it's saved to the state of the one that's bound to, if that makes sense.
A little bit. I think it sounds a little bit like an event bus, I think.
Okay.
I don't do enough React to know exactly. But either way, it was good stuff.
I'm still learning it myself, so
yes. Not a problem.
But I ran that technique by someone that knows React better than I do, and she confirmed that yes, that is how you do that sort of thing. So
they weren't like, "Where did you find this?"
Like, what is this craziness that you're doing?
Yeah.
Like, cool. I don't know, but yeah. So cool. All right. Well, I appreciate everybody coming to see the presentation. I hope you got something out of it. And again, just reach out to us if you have any questions or you want to chat about something. We're always on Slack chatting about WordPress news, what we're working on, problems we're running into. It's a really great place for knowledge sharing and learning and participating. So thank everybody. It's 8 o'clock, so I think that's about a good time to close things out. Jason, I think that's good. I was going to say something, but I forgot.
You're like, meh, bye.
Yeah.
No,
I'll send out my slides soon, so you all can take a look at it. And once we coordinate with Pam, we'll figure out where that video is going to be, and we'll.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'll post. I think we'll definitely post the video, the link to the video in the Slack. That's something someone asked.
And we'll also put it in the meetup as well.
In the meetup. Okay, so we'll send it out in like a meetup email. Okay,
if we put in a comment in the meetup, the new comment will fire off to everybody that attended.
Cool. Excellent.
Yeah, that works.
Great.
Thanks,
Cool.
everybody.
Well, thanks, everybody, and have a great night. Stay
Thanks.
safe.
Yep.
Bye.